I came back in April. They had tried to talk me to staying in the army because I'd gotten a commission while I was at Walter Reed. And I became overnight the first lieutenant from a private. It was a much better life, but it was pretty good before. But anyway, I said I wasn't interested in staying in the army. So I came back as a mammalian physiologist, did some experiments with him, and with Vernon Brooks, who had been hired while I was away. But he wasn't here yet when I came back. He had also been in Australia. Did some experiments and did some more work with Dr. Lloyd, and then started my own work, which dealt with the mammalian central nervous system. And I had published some papers with Dr. Lloyd. It asks in here about my first paper. And my first paper was something I did when I was at Walter Reed, or before, yeah. And I did some work with my first student, which was published. But my first real paper that I liked, the others were published in, good journals. But the first paper that I'm really proud of was one that I did with my second student, who had been a Rhodes Scholar. He came here, and what the paper showed, what's the best word for this? There had been some sort of suggestions to that effect, but we proved it, that in the central nervous system, neurons could be excited, not only because of receiving an excitatory input, but because they also received an inhibitory input, which could be inhibited, and in that way they were excited. And that was a paper I liked very much. It came out in 1962 with my second student, Dick Burgess, who did his own thesis. Well, my two students always did their thesis on their own, especially after him, and published by themselves, because I thought that's what they should do. So he did his own work. All my subsequent students always did their own work in the laboratory after first working with me, and then their thesis or whatever it is they published on their own without me. I think because I was against that. And so he was a very good student. After doing various postdocs, he became a professor in Utah. And I saw him a number of times after that. And so I have been in touch with him in recent years. So then I went on. I worked in the same field Dr. Lloyd had worked with, but eventually didn't use his methods, because I took up the same methods that Dr. Fortes was using. He was my supervisor at Walter Reed, but they were preceded by Eccles. That he was a steamroller. He published numerous papers using that approach. I think they were using microelectrodes and the recording from single cells. This was a method I used for years. And eventually, so I continued doing this work, and then I had a letter from Eccles. He used to come. He came here when Dr. Bronkwood became president. I should mention I got reappointments while I was in the army. And Dr. Bronk invited people he knew who were well-known scientists to come and meet students, stuff like that. And Eccles came under that, and I had met him again. I think he also was quite helpful when I got promoted, because I think he always spoke well of me. He didn't tell me this, but I'm sure of this. And I invited me to join his laboratory. He offered me a 3-year appointment. And this would have been tempting, but I painfully rejected it. Although I think I would have benefited from going there. I rejected it because, number one, I didn't really want to leave Rockefeller. And number two, my family, my wife's family was here. You know, I had 2 daughters by that time. Number 2. And I didn't really want to take a 3-year appointment, move everybody to Walter Reed. So I said, well, okay, but would you like to spend the summer here? So I accepted that. After I'd been there for a while, this was 1963. Forget the appointment I have there when I have my bibliography or somewhere. But it was either honorary visiting professor or it was honorary fellow, I don't remember. So I went. It was a wonderful experience. I didn't actually work with him, but I talked with him quite a lot. And I worked with one of his former students who had his own laboratory in the department. His name was David Curtis. And I think before he retired, became head of the Australian National University, which is what Eccles eventually had been. But and I did a lot of reading while I was there. I worked with David, who became a neuropharmacologist. And I was there, I think I arrived in June in 1963. And before that time, I had been ill. I had a very bad case of ulcerative colitis. I was in the hospital a couple of times. And every time when I came back from the hospital, I would go back to work. I was in the hospital for quite a while. Anyway, so I was between hospitals. I went to Australia and I worked with him, published a paper later, and yes, I really met some people that you got to know later. And I think I came back in I think early September, 63. Mm-hmm. And so back to Rockefeller, and then after a while, in the fall, I think. Yeah, the paper had been published, so I guess, and then I got sick in 63, yeah. I got back and I was setting up my own lab, and I had to go back to the hospital for a while. I still worked with him. We published some more papers, and then he did his laboratory was next to his office, and mine was one door down. And they eventually had to build it was a big room. They built an office for me in there. I can't remember the very beginning. I think it's possible when I came back. No, Vernon Brooks. I think, well, one could look him up, but I did some experiments with him also. And it was interesting work, which we published together. And and he was in the department for quite a while. Interesting fellow, but hard to get along with in the laboratory. But other than that, very nice. And about 64, he left.